Look at a massive tree, and you have to ask a basic physical question. Where does all that heavy, solid wood actually come from? It seems like the organism builds its weight out of nothing but dirt and the open sky. What you are watching is a living factory actively manufacturing solid mass. In biology, we call this photosynthesis. The process is a mechanical operation happening inside the leaf's cells. It is the active assembly of matter. Photosynthesis is an example of anabolism. This is an assembly line where kinetic solar energy is converted into stored chemical energy by building complex molecules. The direct result of this molecular construction is a measurable increase in the plant's dry weight. To understand how this mass is created, we have to look closely at how the plant captures ephemeral inputs, invisible gas and weightless photons, and mechanically locks them into solid matter. This transformation follows a strict chemical balance. Here is the exact math of the factory. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 12 molecules of water yield 1 molecule of glucose, 6 molecules of water, and 6 molecules of oxygen. The raw materials on the left side of this equation are simple environmental inputs. The carbon dioxide is absorbed directly from the surrounding air through the leaves, while the water is pulled up from the soil by the roots. But look at the product on the right. That single molecule of glucose is a complex carbohydrate. That glucose is the physical, structural mass that drives the anabolic weight gain of the organism. To see exactly how it gets built, we need to step inside the cellular workspace. The entire manufacturing operation is localized within a specific anatomical organ, the green leaf. If we cut through the leaf's outer protective layers and zoom into the interior, we find a dense network of cells. This specific layer is the mesophyll tissue. It acts as the primary hub where all photosynthetic activity takes place. Inside a single mesophyll cell, protected behind a double membrane, sits the actual engine of production, the chloroplast. The interior of the chloroplast is divided into 2 distinct biological manufacturing floors. First, there are dense, stacked disc-like structures, known as the grana. Surrounding them is a liquid matrix called the stroma. In 1905, scientist Frederick Blackman observed that photosynthesis is strictly divided into 2 distinct sequential phases, operating across these 2 specific zones. The physical architecture of the chloroplast dictates the sequence. The raw energy from the sun must first be harvested by the grana, before any physical assembly can begin in the fluid of the stroma. The first phase of this sequence happens entirely within the grana. We call this the light-dependent phase. The biochemical reactions in these stacks are completely reliant on the direct presence of solar photons. When sunlight hits the grana, it strikes specialized chlorophyll molecules, immediately activating them with energy. This chart shows the visible light spectrum against chlorophyll's absorption rate. The curve peaks at red and blue wavelengths, marking maximum solar energy harvest. At the center, it drops near 0 in the green zone, reflecting green light outward. Because of this specific reflection, a plant placed under purely green illumination cannot harvest energy, and its photosynthetic engine essentially shuts down. Once optimal red or blue light energizes the chlorophyll, that energy is put to work. The active chlorophyll splits an incoming water molecule into pieces. Biologists refer to this light-driven fracture as photolysis. The water molecule is physically torn apart into hydrogen ions and hydroxyl ions. This specific moment corrects a widespread misconception, where the oxygen plants breathe out comes from. It is often assumed plants convert carbon dioxide directly into breathable oxygen. In reality, the oxygen plants exhale comes entirely from these broken water molecules. The hydroxyl ions release electrons and combine to form O2 gas, which vents out of the leaf. With the water split and the waste oxygen vented away, the cellular machinery captures the remaining energy. It forces an inorganic phosphate to bond with ADP, creating a fully charged chemical battery known as ATP. Simultaneously, a compound called NADP+ acts as an electron acceptor, often called the Hill reagent. It sweeps up the loose electrons from the split water to become a second highly energized molecule, NADPH. The grana has completed its task, disposing of waste oxygen into the atmosphere, and generating the charged chemical batteries required to power the actual assembly of mass. We now leave the stacked grana and move outward into the surrounding fluid matrix, the stroma. This is the domain of the light-independent phase. The chemical reactions here do not require direct sunlight, but are completely dependent on the ATP and NADPH generated in the previous step. With those energy reserves moving out into the fluid, the construction of solid matter begins. The primary goal of this phase is carbon assimilation, taking atmospheric carbon and anchoring it into an organic molecule. Carbon dioxide flows into the stroma from the environment. It is immediately intercepted by an existing 5-carbon compound called Ru-BP. The two bind together, creating a highly stable chemical intermediary. The exact pathway of this chemical reaction was mapped out by scientist Melvin Calvin, proving how plants lock atmospheric carbon into solid biological forms. In recognition of his work, this sequence of mechanical reactions is known as the Calvin cycle. Visualize the Calvin cycle as a rotating mechanical wheel. Intercepted carbon dioxide is fed into the top. As it turns, ATP and NADPH batteries plug into the sides, draining solar energy to rearrange atoms, dropping a forged 6-carbon glucose molecule out the bottom. By utilizing solar-charged batteries to lock invisible, gaseous carbon into a heavy, solid molecular structure, the cellular factory completes the creation of structural mass. Zooming out to view the entire chloroplast, we see a perfectly unified continuous loop of production. Materials flow incessantly. Charged carriers move outward to power assembly lines, while depleted carriers cycle back to be recharged by the sun. The dependency between the two zones is absolute. The grana harvests the energy, and the stroma builds the product. We can now look back at the governing chemical equation to verify exactly what we've observed. This chart frames the balanced equation of photosynthesis. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 12 molecules of water react to form 1 glucose molecule, water, and 6 molecules of oxygen. The math tracks the physical reality. Those 6 oxygen molecules on the right are the direct remnants of the 12 water molecules on the left. The dense 6-carbon framework of the glucose molecule is built entirely out of the carbon dioxide absorbed from the air. This exact microscopic assembly line is the definition of anabolism. By accumulating these complex carbohydrates, the plant actively builds its solid, dry weight, molecule by molecule. The biphasic factory operating inside the leaf is the core biological engine that transforms sunlight and thin air into the dense structural foundation supporting almost all life on Earth.